This is the making of the John Batchelor Show. It is Tuesday, the 3rd of March. The headlines from New York, Wall Street Journal. UAE raises combat readiness level. What to know about the Mideast conflict today. Bushehr power plant in Iran at risk, Russia says. Qatar Energy to stop downstream production. Iran Shahed drones and how they work. Stock futures slide, oil surges again. U.S. success against Iran could be a game changer for world security. Why China is doing so little to help a friend under fire. What the Iran strike could mean for the U.S. inflation. Iranian drones and missiles challenge stretched U.S. forces. Enough. I welcome Judy Dempsey of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, a senior scholar. She is in Berlin. And I'm most concerned immediately as to how the European Union regards this conflict, because it's not part of a coalition, because that headline about Qatar means that the strikes, the missiles into the Qatar oil fields, have increased the price of natural gas in Europe overnight 50%. Europe was not in great shape to begin with, given the scramble of these last years with the Ukraine conflict. And now, I'm also concerned about the EU and its patchwork approach to the Iran war. It's hard to say who's in and who's not. Yesterday, Mr. Macron said that he was in conversation about forward-basing nuclear weapons to other parts of Europe. Now we have headlines saying the Bushehr and Natanz facilities have been hit. Bushehr is an active reactor. So the fact that it's been struck in some fashion by this war is alarm bells for those of us who have worried for years about nuclear power plants in combat zones. I could go on endlessly, but I'm eager to hear from Judy because she represents the strongest industrial and banking state in the European Union, now hit like everybody else with a sudden war that has pushed the price of electricity to dangerous levels and called into question the preparation for an extended war. And I remind, there is no timeline here. The president each day has a different metaphor. Today, it sounds like Groundhog Day for Joe Biden. The president actually said, whatever it takes. That's repeated in the headlines. That's not a timeline. That's rhetoric. Judy, it is not a good day. It is war in Ukraine, war in Lebanon, war in Iran, war in the Gulf. That's enough. The EU right now has a fresh crisis because of energy. How bad is it, Judy? What do we know? Good day to you.
Good day, John. Good day is putting it mildly. So the EU, I hate to say this to your loyal listeners, the European Union is not in good shape. It is divided. It's divided on the leadership level. The EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen is at odds with the foreign policy chief Kaja Kallas, who runs the so-called foreign ministry of the EU, and they didn't share how to do a joint statement even on Saturday, and they're barely talking to each other. So this is the element of the institutional leadership disunity. On the other level, Germany is criticised for, not evacuating their nationals quickly enough. By the way, Chancellor Merz is off to see President Trump at this hour as we speak, which is not the most opportune moment. President Macron said he may send some carriers.
Right.
Britain will support the United States effort, but essentially it's all over the place. At the end of the day, Europe is incredibly vulnerable with the possibility of attacks by Iranian drones if they go that far, but also the whole energy and inflation crisis that has been triggered by this war because of the huge dependence on Europe and indeed China and the United States on the Hormuz Straits for the delivery of energy to the European Union.
Judy, let us begin because this is all good material and I want everybody to hear it on the radio later in this day. So I will begin immediately with the recording with your permission. This is audio only. We'll go for about 17 and a half minutes. And Thaddeus McCotter, who always joins us, is not able to today and sends his regards and apologies, Judy. Here we go. 5, and thank you. 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm John Batchelor. Judy Dempsey is a senior scholar for the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and joins me from Berlin in the midst of the fog of war. I remind myself and I remind everyone. The first 3 reports are wrong. Fog of war does not clear sometimes for years. There is no expectation that you can anticipate at this point to get clarity. That is not the adversarial relationship we've learned. There's information warfare going on in addition to kinetic warfare. All of that means that when I read headlines, I have to hesitate and say, maybe. I will read some, for example. UAE raises combat readiness level. Bushehr power plant in Iran at risk, Russia says. Qatar energy to stop downstream production. That's enough. You get the idea. Russia says Qatar cutting off its energy to Europe and the UAE raising its combatant level. UAE has always been seen as a safe haven in these conflicts. A conversation with a colleague of mine who is in Dubai, looking out from his high-rise picture window, he could see the intercepts over Dubai incoming from Iran. That's never happened before. And the risk to people below is not a missile, it's the shreds from the destroyed missile raining down on that very crowded and prosperous city. Judy, it is not a good day. We are at war in Ukraine, war in Lebanon, war in Iran, war in the Gulf. That's enough. How is it from the EU's point of view? I noted that Qatar headline. That explains the 50% spike in natural gas yesterday. Was Europe ready? Good day to you, Judy.
Good day, John, and thank you for having me on your show. No, Europe is not ready. And leaving aside the United States attack on Iran, Europe had plenty of warnings months ahead that their energy stocks were being depleted. They're an average 30% full only across several of the European Union member states. They could have taken action, increased the supplies from the United States with LNG, increase the supplies with Qatar, diversify even more. This is not looking good now, particularly. So energy prices will go up, inflation will go up. And on the political level, the European member states are just completely divided on how to react to this this extraordinarily complex war now taking place in the Middle East.
Mr. Trump in these last hours asked how long or what the commitment is, has mentioned 2 things that are alarming because they've not been part of the conversation. One is ground troops. That was mentioned, Judy. It's in the Bloomberg report. The president will not rule it out. Secondly, whatever it takes, a phrase that President Joe Biden used during the Ukraine war. It would now appear, if you generalize, that we have Ukraine, whatever it takes, however long it takes, Lebanon, whatever it takes, how long it takes, Iran, whatever it takes, how long it takes. These are not conditions that create prosperity or confidence around the world. We are in a war that cannot end easily. Your measure of the European Union and NATO, they're not the same body, I understand. Are they prepared for lengthy and unending conflict? Is anybody prepared for that, Judy?
It would be easy to answer if we had a strategic timetable and a strategic outlook from the White House, but we have very different views coming from the Pentagon, from the State Department, from the White House. It's just very, very confusing, and it's not giving any kind of signals to the European Union. This is the first thing. And secondly, as for the European Union and the member states, they are completely at odds on how to deal with the Iranian crisis. They do know, however, and this is the common thread, they do know that this is very bad for the Eurozone, the Euro currency. It's very bad for inflation. Inflation will go up. It's very bad for energy costs. This comes at a very, very vulnerable time for Europe, which is trying to trying to get over the trough of very slow economic growth, and this war will not help it. Finally, they have no idea how long this war is going to last, but nobody does. But what worries them is not just the escalation, but the spreading of this war. And it's very interesting what's happening with Saudi Arabia now. The US embassy in Riyadh was attacked. I mean, these are allies on the US on the one hand, and sort of so-called hostile enemies towards Iran. This is a conflagration which hasn't been played out yet, unfortunately.
I'm watching a video on the front page of the Wall Street Journal right now that feels like I'm in a video game. It's interception of incoming from Iran in the Gulf. And this scene is being replayed again and again all night long. It's now daytime in the Gulf, but they're plus 9 hours, I believe, plus 7 to 9 hours in that region. So we're watching. I once was under a rocket barrage like this outside of Gaza. It's not threatening if you don't know what it is. It looks like something's very high in the sky. Without clouds, you can't tell how high it is. And suddenly there's a pop, very small pop. You can barely hear it, a very high, and there's smoke, and that's it. What next happens is the shrapnel rains down on whatever's below it, which is why it's dangerous to wander around without a hat on under a rocket barrage. You cannot assume where the shrapnel will fall. But, Judy, I bring this up because on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, this has become normalized, that people are out with their iPhones taking photographs, sending them to mom, I guess. It's a peculiar kind of war because the civilians do not run in panic the way we're familiar war creating panic before. It's as if there's despair and recognition that this is something to write home about. Is that the way it is in Berlin? People regard this as inevitable. In other words, nothing to fear.
No, they don't regard it as inevitable. They're actually very, very worried about it. And the worry is compounded by the lack of clarity coming from Washington, but the lack of clarity coming from Brussels. Who has clarity, actually, on all of this issue? Perhaps the Chinese have the best clarity because they've called on the Iranians to keep the Hormuz Straits open. Naturally, the Chinese economy is totally dependent on this extraordinary commercial sea lane channel that brings its exports worldwide. But in terms of getting back to Europe, the inevitability wasn't there. They didn't expect it, but now they have it and they are extremely worried. And it's very interesting that there's something in common between the Israeli reaction and the Iranian reaction, in the sense that now it's a big festival in Israel. Purim, curiously coincides with the release, the ability to escape the Persian onslaught of the Jews, and this is a big celebration in Israel that they survived, but they've been told to stay in their bunkers. Interestingly, what Trump says to the Iranians now, stay inside. And so on the one hand, he calls them to take to the streets and overthrow what remains of it. And then on the other hand, given the attack on the civilian infrastructure, he's telling them to stay inside. And if you look at the streets now, of what stuff we can get from Iranian, not from Iranian television, but from other foreign broadcasts in Farsi, the Iranians are not going out in the streets because they're going to get killed.
The European leadership, Mr. Macron, talking about deploying nuclear weapons across Europe. Mr. Herr Merz, is in Washington, I believe, to meet with the president right now. These are two strong voices in the European Union and NATO simultaneously that have been at variance over these years of Ukraine war. Judy, it's astonishing to me that I'm treating the Ukraine war as old news. It's right in front of us that Mr. Zelensky is concerned about his missile arsenal for interceptions of the campaign that Russia's launched against him to make people miserable, frightened, cold, and exiting Ukraine. And yet that's yesterday's news. So let's focus on France deploying nuclear weapons and Germany Herr Merz, is this a time we miss a European foreign policy with an army, a military in some fashion to help out? Is there a missing component of the European Union authority?
Well, there's always a missing component of the European Union authority, and that component is leadership, united leadership, and it's not there at the moment. It's sort of discombobulated. But what we have is President Macron's extraordinary speech at one of the main nuclear weapon sites in France. And it's been on the cards for some time, but President Macron has always believed not only in strategic autonomy, but the Europeans having a kind of nuclear strategic umbrella, which France has, and they're willing to share it, but France will control it. And they're willing to cooperate much more with Germany, which is a big change in the German outlook in terms of nuclear capability. Don't forget that they actually host US nuclear bombs in Germany. But this is a big step by France, and I think it'll be accepted. And he's bringing in the Dutch, he's bringing in Poland, he's bringing in Germany and some other countries. It's long overdue, but it needs a crisis to make it reality. And Macron only has a very limited time left in office, and he really has to push this through. And Chancellor Merz has his plate full when he visits President Trump. It's not the ideal timing to talk about Russia, talk about sanctions, to talk about Ukraine, and of course the Middle East. And this is going to be a big, important, but short meeting, given what's happening in the Middle East.
Yes, Judy refers to the fact that the Chancellor of Germany, who has a full briefcase of things already, is with the President of the United States in these hours. And we look for leadership from both of them afterwards. However, scanning the markets, Judy, this is not a good day for the bulls, not everywhere on the world market. Korea is down some astonishing 7% overnight. So we're looking at the day two of the panic. I want to turn to a European measure of the American public at this point, because after all the partisanship of these last years, it's necessary for these two allies, the European Union and the United States, to understand each other's politics. Judy Dempsey of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. She's in Berlin, a senior scholar. This is what we know so far, the raining weapons over the major cities of the Gulf of, over the Persian Gulf. That is new. That's not happened before. This is war on people who are not participating in the war by Iran. I'm John Batchelor. I'm John Batchelor with my colleague Judy Dempsey of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. She's in Berlin. And I turn to American politics only briefly because I want to understand how Europe sees American politics at this point. Judy, two polls came out last week. We haven't had a fresh poll, but we could within days or hours, indicating that the American voters asked about the U.S. involvement in an Iran war are decidedly not disposed towards it. The numbers were astonishing, even in the Republican Party, against intervention in Iran. Why? Regime change. We've been taught to understand that regime change is a bad idea, and that in Afghanistan and Iraq it led to many deaths, much treasure, and no resolution that was favorable to democracy, the United States, or fair-minded people in those countries. Two, Mr. Trump, in his campaign of 24, deliberately went out of his way to accuse people of being interventionalists and mocking the neocons and mocking those who've been to war in Afghanistan and Iraq, emphasizing he's a peace president. And three, right now we're looking at the midterms in a few months' time, and that will determine everything about the ability of the Trump administration to perform in the final 2 years. And the polls are decidedly against the president. So right now, to summarize it, the American people do not, as of the most recent polls, support the president's decision to make war on Iran, whatever it takes. Two, the Democratic Party has stayed back so far I don't generalize, but I do say there's strong voices in the Democratic Party, including former Vice President Kamala Harris speaking against this decision by the president to attack Iran, to make war on Iran because. And three, it is not clear to me at all that the Trump administration is uniform on this. There is reporting here that Vice President Vance is at odds with the president and with Secretary of State Rubio at the decision to attack Iran in conjunction with Israel. So we do not have a picture here, Judy, that resembles anything like Afghanistan conflict, anything like Iraq conflict, anything like the combat, presentation after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia in both 2014 and then again in 2022. It's a completely mixed picture. And I'd have to generalize by saying America is reluctant to enter into another war, and here we are. Does Europe understand this?
Europe just Europe is confused and puzzled by this because Iran didn't attack the United States. There wasn't the 9/11 event, the WMD issue. Iraq, which the Bush administration played, was a factor, but not the big factor in Iran. And the Europeans are just not only puzzled, but they're incredibly worried for the reason that I mentioned earlier, that they're not being given a coherent strategic outlook and goal about what this attack on Iran is about. If it's about regime change, and then they change the wording of it, whether it's the Pentagon saying something or the State Department, whatever, they're absolutely confused about it. But at the end of the day, the Europeans are incredibly worried that this is going to have devastating conflicts and consequences for migration, for the economy, for inflation, for global security, for commercial trading lanes. The whole element is now open up to the Europeans, and they realize this, especially the big companies, the trading companies, and of course the foreign analysts in Berlin and across the capitals in the European Union.
The additional twist of this is that it's not at all clear. At this point, Judy, we're not going to have a speech from the Oval Office. Why we fight? It's not going to happen. We've waited for hours and days about that, and the president instead has chosen to make remarks when he's toing, throwing events, like whatever it takes. We're not going to get clarity about the war aims. There is a list this morning of the obvious: nuclear weapons, ballistic missiles, regime change, all quite fantastic given the state we're in. So the reason I'm pressing on this point is because it would be easy for the German political voice or the British political voice or the French political voice to condemn America. But America is not supporting this war as of the most recent information we have. Some political voices are supporting the war so far, but it's very far from a majority. I mean, wow, Jody, about as far as you can get.
It's as far as you can get, but it's even further in the European Union and among the member states, because actually all the EU member states are still wedded to the idea of diplomacy. They're still wedded to the idea of going through the United Nations. They're still wedded to the idea of actually trying to de-escalate, but using war just as the pretext and not coupling it with any kind of diplomatic track is a big blow to the European Union and to the EU mindset on dealing with diplomacy. And what depresses them most is that they, along with the United States under Obama, were pressing very, very hard to try to get some kind of nuclear deal with the Iranians. Then Trump pulled back and actually got rid of it completely. But the point is that they kept talking, trying to build up some trust. Okay, maybe there wasn't great trust there, we don't know.
Right.
And the International Atomic Energy Agency was involved as well. But keep talking and find out how each side thinks and how much they're prepared to give. That was all washed away under the Trump administration. And now we're paying a very high price.
Judy Dempsey, senior scholar for the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace in Germany, in Berlin, in the fog of war. I'm John Batchelor. Were you aware of how decidedly against the polling is here?
Yeah.
I've never seen that number.
It's very interesting, John. He just really was sitting in Florida and, Ratcliffe keeps his mouth shut while he can't say anything else. But it's extraordinary. There's no statesman, like nothing.
But we have a break between, we're told there's a break between the vice president and the president.
Oh, who cares about Vance? I mean, he could have put in his tuppence worth. Now he sees the opinion polls, so he may be pushing for this kind of division.
Correct, but that's a division we've not seen before. We've been given to understand that the MAGA base is uniform. And maybe it is, but the reporting...
I don't know. We'll see what Rubio is doing. He must be shocked by all of this, frankly.
Well, Rubio has a portfolio that's full up, Judy. What about, I talked about Caracas every Monday, and I talked to one of the leaders of the opposition yesterday. And although they're routinely jubilant at the decisions that the Trump and Mr. Rubio have made, the Trump and Rubio administration have made, they do have in their minds, something more has to happen. There are 500 political prisoners still in that dungeon.
This doesn't factor into the idea of human rights, of accountability, and that for the United States cut back the Farsi broadcast, cut back the VOA radio for your feeding in information and everything. They have frankly, they have no idea what regime change means, leaving aside Iraq and Afghanistan. They have no idea what state building means. They have no idea how to mobilize civil society. They have no idea when you invade, the mess you have to pick up afterwards. Haven't they learned anything since World War II? They didn't do a bad job after World War II, actually.
I don't have any. That's what's wrong here, Judy. They're missing pieces as to. I don't. I have, after 25 years, I have no experience reporting a war that is decidedly opposed by the United States of America's
public. This is something new. This is really, really something new. And I think the common factor among all of the Trump administration people, that team, they don't have an institutional memory, which is very, very dangerous. Biden was probably the last Atlanticist. I mean, Obama was very weak also vis-a-vis Syria. But, if you're going to set red lines, or as you say, as long as it takes, well, define it, but don't set red lines that you're prepared to break. Just then don't go to war. Just keep your mouth shut, or do, different kind of operations behind the scenes.
At this point, I cannot picture a meeting of the allies, NATO. I cannot picture them coming together and agreeing to prosecute the war in Iran. Can you imagine that?
No, but unfortunately, Mark Rutte is such a sycophant when it comes to Trump that he'll play Trump's thing, but the NATO allies will not go along with this. It's just far too dangerous. One thing we have to keep an eye out on is how the Iranians, they're attacking certain UK targets in Cyprus. Cyprus is in the EU, but it's not in NATO. And maybe they will try to attack other, UK sites in other areas as well. But I cannot, this is a bit like the Iraq war, when the NATO allies were so divided over this illegal attack on Iraq. And what we are now seeing is an illegal attack on Iran. Yeah. Totally illegal.
I saw that debate start in Britain this morning, I believe.
Yeah.
And that will spread as
and in Spain. And the Germans should speak out openly that this is absolutely illegal. It should go through the UN. Trump doesn't care about the UN. And this is against the whole idea of integrity of countries. It's extraordinary. Trump just invading, disregarding any kind of consultation. any kind of congressional permission, any kind of explaining, and of course overriding any kind of permission to do this. This is absolutely illegal, and he thinks he's got carte blanche to do what he wants to do.
There are the markets, Judy. We've noted over the last year, when it came to trade, that the Trump administration responded immediately when the markets voted thumbs down on an idea. There was a backing away of commitment by the Trump administration, or a mitigation of whatever is the policy at the moment. And I can imagine that finding what is conveniently called an off-ramp in these next days. Can you imagine that?
Well, I was thinking of something else, maybe off-ramp. Yes, of course, markets influence so much Trump's attitude towards tariff policy, but that's not over yet, because given all the lawsuits that he's faced by his own American companies. But there's something else. And this is the Witkoff-Kushner duo doing all these corrupt negotiations with Middle Eastern countries, thinking they can bring them on board. Then we get Iran, and they have the hostilities. This is thankfully we're not on record. This is a regime in the White House absolutely sunk in corruption and shady deals, and thinking that a war here or a war there will fix anything. Well, maybe there's a silver lining in all of this, that the Middle Eastern countries will realize how dirty the White House is when it comes to waging war, because all of these Middle East countries are now going to be caught up with this war with Iran. And Iran may be defeated at the end of the day. We have no idea what's going to come out of all of this, but this is an act of revenge across the region.
Judy,
unfinished business.
Judy, I thank you very much for this today, and I'd like to introduce you to a longtime colleague of mine who's joining me to talk about the Lebanon war momentarily. Bill Raggio, a senior fellow for the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Bill and I have been together since the Iraq-Afghanistan conflict of 2003. Bill, this is Judy Dempsey of the
Hello, Bill.
Hello, Judy. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Judy and I have been through for the last few years trying to explain to John the EU. I learn what I can. I know there are 27 nations in it. How about that, Judy? No problem. I got it.
We still have 27 shame written left. But
Judy, I look forward to next week.
Yeah,
and
next week.
Thank you very much. And Thaddeus will be
pleasure.
back.
Hello, John. Bye-bye.
Nice to meet you, Judy.
How do I get out of here? We'll just get out.
Yes, you hit remove and you're going. Bill, here we are.
Yes.
And I sent that note to you on the Pakistan conflict. Did you see that?
Yes, I did.
I'd like to start there. And have we heard from David?
I haven't, and I've been texting him all morning. I'm worried he slept through again here.
Yeah, there's reason to. There's a ground invasion going on in Lebanon.
Yeah.
I'm not overly concerned because it was going to be a bonus. I've got Jonathan Schanzer at 9.
Okay.
So we'll do Lebanon, but you're here, so let's take advantage and do Pakistan, Afghanistan. Let me get that note about what the heck is going on. When we talked to Hussein Haqqani yesterday, he said they didn't know beforehand, but sure looks like they're taking advantage of the fact that all eyes are on the Gulf.
Yeah, I think the Pakistanis certainly don't mind that everyone else is distracted. You got Ukraine, they got Ukraine, now they have the Iran, so they can act at will. Look, I still think they'll look for an off-ramp on this, as I think the Pakistanis are not going to invade Afghanistan. They're not going to put boots on the ground there beyond border outposts. I don't expect that. I don't expect the Taliban to escalate. The Taliban, their responses are really just to show their people that they won't take it from the Pakistanis. At the end of the day, I still believe, John, that the Pakistanis believe in their strategic depth in Afghanistan. That just like after Mumbai, I don't know if you remember this, but when the Mumbai attack happened and war was risked between India and Pakistan, and the Pakistani Taliban were attacking, a Pakistani general, a corps commander, came out and said, it made an appeal to the Pakistani Taliban, said, hey, we have an enemy. We have a real enemy. It's India. And he described them as their wayward brothers. They're wayward brothers who were murdering Pakistani civilians by the thousands, attacking the Pakistani state, suicide attack at the mosque and the general headquarters and the mosque in Rawalpindi for the Pakistani military. And that's how, I don't think that's changed in 20 years, John.
The information we have is that they've launched an air campaign to destroy the equipment that we left behind.
Yeah.
And half of it is destroyed. There's also indication from the early reporting, I don't know who's in Kabul, a pretty dangerous assignment.
Sure.
That the original target was the Pakistani Taliban.
Yeah.
And their camps. Have you seen any reporting that they're striking Al-Qaeda camps?
Well, those Pakistani Taliban camps, Al-Qaeda is all helping to operate those camps. So by default, they're hitting Al-Qaeda as well. I haven't seen a breakdown. So we know that Al-Qaeda is running training camps in 13 of Afghanistan's 34 provinces. That was the last report from the UN, I believe was last summer 2025, where it gave us, the UN hasn't given us a breakdown of where those camps exist any longer. But that doesn't mean there's 13 camps. That just means there's camps in 13 provinces. The UN noted that there are multiple camps in some of these provinces. So the Pakistani Taliban is operating camps, I believe, in 1 or 2 provinces. And again, they're doing them in conjunction with Al-Qaeda. So if they're hitting the Pakistani camps, they're hitting Al-Qaeda. But I don't know if they're going out after the camps where the Pakistani Taliban is not. Just not getting that level of detail. This is Afghanistan without one of the things I enjoyed about covering Afghanistan during the war is you had a vibrant independent media in Afghanistan that really did a fantastic job of trying to tell people what was happening. And that doesn't exist. Now everything's filtered through the Taliban controlled press. Like Tolo News was a great news outlet until the Taliban took over. Now it's, the Taliban's Tolo News, et cetera, et cetera.
What is the status of Kabul? I have not seen a clear reporting on it for quite some time. Is it a poverty, wretched place? Have they, in any fashion, won diplomatic recognition or help from Europe?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, even during the U.S. presence in Afghanistan and with the Afghan government, Kabul wasn't, a vibrant, city. It was certainly a city, outside of the green zone. And select neighborhoods particularly where NGOs and security companies and some businesses had basically safe houses, you would call them, or compounds. It was a very poor.
I lost you momentarily, Bill. Your sound's off momentarily. Are you still with me? Can you reconnect? I'm not hearing you. This is the making of the John Batchelor Show, and things like this happen during the making. I think what happened, Bill, do I see you moving?
I am back.
Yeah, you're back. But please continue your thought. We were talking about the status of Kabul.
Yeah, I'm not sure where we got cut off, but I think I was saying outside of the green zone, outside of the compounds where NGOs and businesses, security companies were operating, some neighborhoods, I've been to them. Those were pretty secure and decent areas. But outside of that, Kabul was a very poor city. I don't think things have improved under the Taliban. But we don't get reporting on it. You're not having reporters walking around or independent people. Everything is filtered tightly through the Taliban. You see what the Taliban wants you to see.
Bill, I think that David is not going to join us, so we should do a Pakistan segment. I could use
Sure,
it.
absolutely. Happy to.
All right, let me set it up and let me check headlines now, and we'll do it with 9 minutes, something like that.
Okay.
We have the time. A couple old guys hanging out on a global.
Yeah. Just another day of war.
Well, 25 years of this. There's something Groundhoggy Day about this.
John, if I had hair, it would be gray and I'd be pulling it out. I just,
Well, I mean, did we know that something big was coming when Pakistan attacked Afghanistan? No, we didn't. There's no way you could argue that at the time.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the last people the U.S. government would trust with information that a war was coming with a neighbor would be Pakistan, given how the Pakistanis have, shafted us for 2+ decades.
Bridget also has a report up today about the Iraqi Shiite militia joining the war.
Yeah.
We'll mention that because we talked about it with her yesterday.
Yes.
And it looks like they're doing 16 drone attacks against enemy bases in Iraq and the region.
Yeah.
But first, these are the golden oldies. It's like playing Teen Angel in 2026.
Yeah.
All right. 5. Thanks, Bill.
Of course.
Let me get a headline, see if we got if anybody's got time out there for a Pakistan story.
Yeah, right. It's pretty low in the queue, but it's very important.
Well, it's continuity. Pakistan, Afghanistan. We have 30 minutes ago from AP. Pakistani says his forces killed 67 Afghan troops. 13 hours ago from Yahoo, Pakistan and Afghanistan are in open war. 25 hours ago from Washington Post, Pakistan says it killed 60. We had that repeat from the wire service. And Asif of Pakistan invents India, Afghan, Iran access to deflect anti-U.S. sentiment. Well, we're not going to get into the politics of this. All right. So I'll start with Pakistan, Afghanistan, open war quote. Then we'll investigate what we know of Afghanistan since it's gone dark since the takeover.
Sure.
And then we'll add Bridget's report on Iraq. Also a golden oldie, just not as old as Afghanistan. 5. Thanks, Bill.
Of course.
5, 4. Make sure I'm still recording. Yep, still recording. 3, 2, 1. I'm John Batchelor. I'm joined by my longtime colleague, Bill Raggio, Senior Fellow for the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy. The war and the rockets and the fear in the Gulf overwhelms the reporting right now, overwhelms the Ukraine war and the pleas of Mr. Zelensky to continue to supply anti-missiles to his batteries because the incoming from Russia continues. Pleas from everywhere in the world for assistance or guidance or participation in the conflicts. One conflict that Bill and I followed for many years is the Afghanistan-Pakistan conflict. There are nothing but contradictions here, but as of right now, AP reporting in these last moments, Pakistan says its forces have killed 67 Afghan troops in cross-border clashes. Kabul rejects the claim. In addition, Pakistan is said to have used its air force to destroy half of the warehouse equipment that the Taliban inherited when the U.S. left precipitously in 2021. There are claims that this is now an open war, however that is interpreted at Rawalpindi and Kabul. We do know there was claims early on that were backed by the Taliban, that the supreme leader or the grand ayatollah or the big boss of Afghanistan Taliban is KIA, airstrike on the leader. At the same time, we're told that the Pakistani military was going after the Pakistan Taliban. That was their original target. Bill, this war right now, how do you measure Pakistan's momentum? What is their objective since they're hardly getting attention from the world media?
Yeah, I think the best thing that could happen to Pakistan with regards to this conflict with the Taliban is that the world is focused elsewhere. The U.S. strikes on Iran Obviously the Russia-Ukraine war, they're going to take far more precedence. So the Pakistanis can pretty much do what they want without receiving any international criticism. The Pakistanis' objective, in my estimation here, is to get the Afghan Taliban to rein in the Pakistani Taliban. The Pakistani state has always supported the Afghan Taliban. They supported the Afghan Taliban with its when it was battling the U.S. and the Afghan government. They wanted the Afghan Taliban in power. That's part of its goal of achieving strategic depth in Afghanistan. What the Pakistanis view Afghanistan is both a physical retreat in case of a war with India, as well as a logistics base with men, material can be used, because they believe the Afghan Taliban and all of the jihadists hate India, and they're correct. The Pakistanis are correct about that. So they want to get back to the status quo, and they want the Pakistani Taliban, which is backed by the Afghan Taliban, to stop launching attacks inside of Pakistan. That is their goal. Right now they're launching airstrikes. They claim 67. The Afghans, I think I call this AFPAC math. If they claim they killed 67, they probably killed 6 or 7. That's pretty much the way things work in that region. The Afghan Taliban, their reason for fighting back is that they need to show that they're a coherent state, that they control security, that they're not going to be pushed around by their neighbors. That's really important to the Afghans, and they want to get the Pakistanis to just stop. I don't expect the Pakistanis to launch a ground invasion in Afghanistan. They may occupy border outposts or go a couple hundred yards, or maybe a couple kilometers inside of Afghanistan, but they're not going to try to oust the Afghan government, the Taliban-led Afghan government, via the ground, and they're certainly not going to be capable of doing it via air. We couldn't beat the Taliban. We wouldn't beat the Taliban. I don't think the Pakistanis could do it either.
Hamdullah Firat, the Afghan government's deputy spokesman, accused Pakistan of violating Afghan airspace and targeting homes, mosques, religious schools, or madrasas, and other civilian targets in, this is like a drum roll of the provinces we reported on, Bill, Langaman, Nangarhar, Paktia, Kandahar, and Kunar provinces, as well as targeting refugee camps. So they're accusing Pakistan of making war on civilians. That is possible, but not credible, given the provocations out of Afghanistan. What about Al-Qaeda, Bill? Are they involved in any of these conflicts that you can see? You've reported at least 10 Al-Qaeda training camps in Afghanistan.
Yeah, so as far as, the Afghan Taliban claiming the Pakistanis are killing civilians, it's certainly possible. Pakistanis are certainly not going to be as discriminating as the U.S. military was when launching strikes. All of the provinces that you mentioned, just about all of them. I haven't seen any reports of training camps in Lagman, but all the other provinces, Kunar, Nuristan, Kandahar, Paktia, they're known to host Al Qaeda and movement of the Taliban in Pakistan training camps. The last we've heard from the United Nations that Al Qaeda was running training camps in 13 of the 34 provinces in Afghanistan. That isn't 13 training camps. There's multiple training camps in some of these provinces. The Al Qaeda runs these camps in conjunction with the movement of the Taliban in Pakistan, in at least 2 provinces. I suspect, but we can't. It's hard to know, John, because we just don't get any independent reporting from Afghanistan. The Afghan Taliban controls the press outlets, and from Pakistan, you're basically going to get the Pakistani military directing the Pakistani press to, they're going to direct that reporting as well. They have a lot of power in doing that. So it is really difficult to know if the Pakistanis are striking at Al Qaeda. And Al Qaeda has always operated, for the last decade and a half, has operated under the covers in Afghanistan. They don't want to embarrass the Afghan Taliban by proclaiming that they are currently in the country, although they slip up occasionally. But their messaging generally goes with the Afghan Taliban that they don't exist in Afghanistan, even though we all know they do. So my guess is they're cooperating with the Afghan Taliban, and of course they are, because we know that Al Qaeda leaders are embedded with the Afghan government. The UN named names in reports. There's several Al Qaeda leaders who serve in the Taliban's government.
Bill, your measure right now of China in this. China is the deep-pocketed supporter of Pakistan, has been for quite some time. All the equipment, all the money, all the support. Pakistan is a desperate country, has no resources whatsoever. China approves or disapproves of this conflict, can we guess?
I think China might actually be pleased with Pakistan for once. One of the problems and China has been backing the Afghan Taliban. It's been working to get its, mineral rights and mining, and as well as commerce going inside of Afghanistan. It believes it has money to make in Afghanistan. So it's certainly been accommodating to the Afghan Taliban. But the Afghan Taliban have also been sheltering another terrorist organization known as the Turkestan Islamic Party, also known as the Eastern Turkestan Islamic Movement. This is a terrorist organization that wants to overthrow the Chinese government, that wants to establish an Islamic emirate in Xinjiang in Western China. So the Chinese are not happy with the Taliban about this, but they've also been unhappy with the Pakistanis in their ability to suppress the Turkestan Islamic Party inside of Pakistan. I think that the Chinese, my guess is that the Turkestan Islamic Party, which also runs training camps and is embedded, the UN estimates it has hundreds of fighters in Afghanistan. I suspect that number is in the thousands. If the Pakistanis are striking at the TIP inside of Afghanistan, the Chinese would be quite pleased with this. But ultimately, I think the Chinese would like to see this situation die down so we can get back to business in both Afghanistan and Pakistan.
Right now, the war is into day 4, day 5. Pakistan's making claims of decapitation kills, and now they're destroying equipment. Does this sound like it's winding down or going to go on for some time?
I think this will go on for some time, for a couple of weeks, until someone steps in and attempts to mediate this. It could be the Chinese. It could be one of the neighboring stands. I think the Chinese would be the most likely to attempt to mediate between the two. Certainly won't be Iran. They're far too busy at this time. The Pakistanis have said that they're in a state of open war. Now, they've said this in the past, by the way. Last October, when the Afghan Taliban and the Pakistanis went at it, the same terminology of open war was used, and yet they basically came to an agreement. They cut a deal to reduce tensions. I suspect that'll happen, but I think the Pakistanis really need to rattle the saber much far more than it has. It's going to want to show its people and that it's serious. It means business inside of Afghanistan, and I think it's going to want to try to pressure the Afghan Taliban and to get them to dial back the movement in the Taliban in Pakistan. Which, by the way, the Afghan government claims doesn't even exist in Afghanistan. So it's quite humorous. Look, this couldn't happen to two better countries, I will say. The Taliban controlling Afghanistan and the duplicitous Pakistanis, which are responsible for the rise of the Afghan Taliban and them taking over Afghanistan. I hate to say it, but the Pakistanis are getting everything they deserved and more.
I'm speaking to Bill Rajo, Foundation for the Defense of Democracy. He's a senior fellow who keeps the Long War Journal. We need to attend, before we turn back to the Iran war, we need to attend to Iraq, another failed intervention by the U.S. in addition to Afghanistan. And note that Baghdad has not been struck by rockets from Iran. Why is that, and what's that mean for the days ahead? I'm John Batchelor. I'm John Batchelor with my good colleague Bill Rajo, and Bill and I have been working on the Afghanistan war for more than 25 years. We right now need to turn to the Iraq war, another failed intervention by the United States over several administrations, the George H.W. Bush administration, the Bill Clinton administration, the George W. Bush administration, the Barack Obama administration fail to solve Iraq. Note right now that the Baghdad government is not worrying about incoming. What does that mean? Note that there are reports that there was much turmoil and threat and some KIA, fog of war, at the Green Zone in Baghdad. What does that mean? Bill, the Iraqi militia are the concern we spoke of yesterday. And the reports are that they're very capable of launching against U.S. and U.S. allies in the region. And they have a lot of heavy equipment, and they have some first-rate war fighters, as I recall. And yet, Baghdad remains silent in this matter. Is Baghdad a card that we expect Iran to play?
So, first, the Iranians don't want to destabilize the Iraqi government. The Iraqi government's currently there's a political, with the results of the last election, they're still haggling over who's going to take control. Ultimately, it's going to be someone who leans towards the Iranians. The Iranians have their hooks throughout the Iraqi government, throughout the Iraqi military, and particularly with the Popular Mobilization Forces, which is basically the amalgamation or the conglomeration of many of the Iranian-backed Iraqi militias. They've been made into an official branch of the Iraqi military, and that reports directly to the prime minister. So the Iranians aren't going to strike at Iraq. It views them at the very least as a friend, and more so as an ally. But the attacks that are going to occur inside Iraq are going to be taken place by the militias. And they're doing it under the banner of what they call the Islamic resistance in Iraq. This is merely a front group for the alphabet soup of Iraqi militias, like the Hezbollah brigades or Kataib Hezbollah, Asib al-Haq, which is the League of the Righteous. And there's a bevy of these groups that are all loyal to the Iranians. They're carrying out drone attacks and other rocket and mortar attacks against U.S. personnel in Iraq or against Iraqi units that they don't view to be loyal to the Iranian cause.
Right now, Bill, the Iraqi militias participated in the massacres in January. That tells me that they're already involved in the war. They're already targeting part of the target complement that you would expect the U.S. to have. But there's been no report of the U.S. On any fashion moving against them in Iraq. Is that significant?
The U.S. have always been very careful in dealing with the Iraqi militias. They number estimates over 200,000 fighters, and a lot of people dismiss them as being, third rate. But these groups are battle hardened. They fought against the Islamic State. They helped eject the Islamic State from western, central, and northern Iraq, and they also have fought inside Syria as well, alongside the Assad regime. Ultimately, they lost that battle, but these are guys, and then their experience goes even before that against fighting against the U.S. So there's a lot of them. They have access to basically the weapons that the United States provides to the Iraqi military. We see them carrying around U.S. supplied weapons, driving U.S. Humvees and tanks and other and armored vehicles and other equipment. So given that the U.S. has a very small footprint inside of Iraq, at the embassy, now up in the north in Erbil, and scattered through some small bases in Iraq.
30 seconds, Bill. 30 seconds.
Yes. The U.S. is very careful, so it doesn't want to openly confront. There's been reports of some strikes on militias, but nobody's claimed them. That could be the U.S., that could be the Israelis, But the Americans are very careful in dealing with the militias because they fear getting a base overrun, having the embassy overrun, something like that.
Bill Raggio, Senior Fellow, Foundation for Defense of Democracies, on the unseen Pakistan-Afghanistan war underway and the unseen Hezbollah brigades of Iraq, who are part of the arsenal that Tehran possesses. I'm John Batchelor. Well done, Bill. I'm going to go immediately to Jonathan. Thank you very much.
Give John my best. Take care, John.
I will. Thank you. And that is the end of the stream. And